My son pointed a finger in my face and screamed that I was a thief in front of dozens of elites. He had no idea that every dollar in his pocket legally belonged to me. That night, I simply typed a command on my battered laptop and vanished. He woke up in a world where his money, power, and fame had evaporated. He wanted a war, but he forgot that I was the one who built the battlefield. My name is Evelyn Hart, to the tuxedo-clad waiters circulating the private room of the Sterling Finch. I was likely just the poor, elderly relative of Adrian Hart, the dashing CEO of Northwind Relay Logistics. They saw a 61-year-old woman in a charcoal suit with a mended lining, trying to make herself invisible at the end of a long table draped in white linen. They did not know that the logistics empire my son now used to fuel his private jets and Aspen ski trips was built by my hands. Starting with a single rusted truck and a roadmap 3 decades ago, the crystal chandeliers overhead cast a harsh, diamond-bright light on the scene. It was my granddaughter Lily's 11th birthday. Adrian had turned it into a networking event. He stood near the head of the table, holding a glass of vintage champagne, boasting to a tech investor about a bold new merger that I knew was actually a desperate attempt to cover quarterly losses. His wife, Brooke, laughed too loudly at the investor's jokes, her hand resting on a diamond necklace that cost more than my first warehouse. "And this," Adrian announced, gesturing to a pile of gifts that looked like a dragon's hoard, "is just the beginning for our princess." Guests had brought iPads, designer handbags, and jewelry suitable for a woman of 30, not a child of 11. When it was my turn, the room fell into a polite, suffocating silence. I reached into my bag and placed a small, unadorned box in front of Lily. She opened it carefully. Inside lay a weathered leather notebook and a single brass key. "What is it, Grandma?" Lily asked, her eyes bright and innocent. I leaned in, ignoring the snickers from Brooke's influencer friends. "It is the start of your freedom. Lily, that key opens a safety deposit box. Inside is a passbook savings account I opened the day you were born. Interest upon interest. It grows slowly, just like I built the company. It is yours, for when you need to stand on your own 2 feet." Before Lily could touch the key, a hand shot out and snatched the box away. "Adrian." He held the contents up to the light, his face twisting in performative disgust. He flipped open the notebook, and a folded bank document fell out. He snatched it up, reading the fine print. I saw his eyes narrow as they landed on the account holder name Evelyn Hart, followed by the small print mentioning the Northwind Relay Family Trust. "This is a joke," Adrian said, his voice dropping to a dangerous register. "You gave my daughter a used notebook and a bank account, under your name. It is a trust account." "Adrian?" I said calmly. "Trust." He laughed, a barking sound that made the waiters freeze. "You are using my money to open accounts in your name to control my daughter. Is that it?" He turned to the room, waving the paper like an indictment. "Look at this. My mother, living under my roof, eating my food, and she is siphoning off cash to play banker with my child. Adrian, please," I said softly, though my pulse remained steady. "Don't you Adrian me," he screamed, the veins in his neck bulging against his silk collar. "You are a thief. You have been skimming off the top. Haven't you hiding money in these little trusts so you can feel important again?" Brooke placed a manicured hand on his arm, her expression a mask of fake concern. "Honey, calm down," she said, pitching her voice so the entire room could hear. You know your mother gets confused. Remember last month we found cash in her drawer. She forgets it isn't hers anymore. It is sad. Really. The humiliation hung in the air, thick and suffocating like smoke. The investors looked at their plates. The influencers smirked. Adrian threw the notebook onto the table. It slid across the linen and knocked over a wine glass. I am done, he spat. I am done supporting a leech who steals from the hand that feeds her. As of tomorrow, your allowance is 0. You don't touch a single account. You don't sign a single check. Everything you have is mine, and I am cutting you off. I looked at him. I looked at the son I had carried, raised, and handed a legacy to. He thought he was stripping me of power. He had no idea he was standing on a trapdoor I had installed years ago. Is that your final decision? Adrian, I asked. Get out, he hissed. Get out before I call security to drag you out. I did not beg. I did not cry. I simply stood up, smoothed the front of my old jacket, and offered a small, cold smile that didn't reach my eyes. Happy birthday, Lily, I said. I turned and walked out of the restaurant, the sound of my sensible heels clicking against the marble floor. Behind me, I heard the nervous chatter resume, the sound of vultures returning to their feast. They thought they had just watched an old woman lose everything. They were wrong. They had just watched a queen decide to burn the castle down. The walk back to Ravensbrook Estates took nearly an hour, but I needed every step of it to clear the scent of expensive perfume and betrayal from my lungs. I could have called the chauffeur, or ordered a car through one of the family accounts, but I refused to owe Adrian another cent for a ride I had technically paid for 1,000 times over. My heels clicked rhythmically against the asphalt, a sound that took me back to the nights I spent hauling freight across the Midwest, clutching a steering wheel with cracked knuckles while a 5-year-old Adrian slept soundly in the cab behind me. Back then, I kept driving so he would never have to walk. Now, I walked so I could remind myself of who I was before the money softened the world around us. When I finally reached the estate, the iron gates swung open automatically, sensing the transponder in my purse. The main house loomed ahead, a monstrosity of glass and steel that Brooke called a masterpiece and I called a mausoleum. The infinity pool shimmered under the moonlight, its heating bill alone costing more than what my father made in a year. Beside it stood the climate-controlled garage housing the Ferraris and the vintage Jaguar Adrian drove twice a summer. I did not head for the front door. Instead, I walked around the side to the detached garage, climbing the narrow wooden stairs to the apartment above it. It was essentially an upgraded servants' quarter, furnished with the beige sofas and scratched tables Brooke had discarded during her last interior design overhaul. The room was silent and smelled faintly of old paper. I locked the door and knelt by the rug near my bed. With a practiced motion, I pried up a loose floorboard. Underneath lay a small, fireproof safe. I spun the dial left, right, left, and the heavy door clicked open. Inside, resting on a bed of velvet, were 3 items: a battered USB drive, a flip phone I had not charged in months, and a thick document bound in blue leather. I sat on the floor and opened the document. It was the original Northwind Relay Family Trust Agreement. My mind drifted back to the glass-walled conference room 3 years ago. I could still see Marcus Hale, my attorney and oldest friend, reading the terms aloud. Adrian had been too busy admiring his reflection in the window to listen to the drone of legalese. He had missed the most critical clause on page 82. The grantor retains the absolute power of revocation. Marcus had read, his eyes meeting mine over his spectacles. Should the beneficiary engage in gross unethical conduct, including but not limited to public humiliation of the grantor or misappropriation of funds, the grantor may unilaterally dissolve the trust and reclaim all assets. I remembered Adrian weeping that day. He had fallen to his knees, burying his face in my lap, swearing he would honor the Hart name. "I will make you proud, Mom," he had sobbed. "I will treat you like the queen you are." I closed the document. "You broke the contract. Adrian," I whispered to the empty room. I had looked the other way when he fired loyal staff members to boost his bonus. I had remained silent when he bought the yacht instead of upgrading the fleet's safety systems. But tonight, he had not just been greedy, he had been cruel. He had pointed a finger at the woman who built his throne and called her a thief in front of his own daughter. I pulled my laptop from under the bed. It was a bulky, scratched machine that Adrian often mocked, calling it a piece of junk fit for a museum. He did not know that Marcus had stripped its internals and rebuilt it as a secure terminal, encrypted and directly linked to the bank's primary server. I plugged in the USB key. The screen flickered, bypassing the standard operating system and loading a black screen with a single blinking cursor. I typed in a string of alphanumeric characters that I had memorized long ago. Access granted. Administrator Evelyn Hart. I reached for the burner phone and dialed the only number saved in its memory. It rang once. "Evelyn." Marcus's voice was gravelly with sleep, but instantly alert. "It is past midnight. Is everything all right?" "No, Marcus," I said, my voice steady. "It is not." "Did he do it?" Marcus asked. He did not need to ask what it was. We had both been waiting for this day, hoping it would never come, yet preparing for it all the same. He stood in the middle of the Sterling Finch and screamed that I was stealing his money, I said, feeling the cold anger settle in my chest like a stone. "He called me a thief, Marcus, in front of Lily." There was a pause on the other end, followed by the rustle of bedsheets and the click of a bedside lamp. "Okay," Marcus said. "I am logging in now. Are you ready to initiate the protocol?" "I am." "Just so we are clear. Evelyn," Marcus said, his tone shifting to professional detachment. "Once we execute the command, there is no undo button. We are freezing the corporate accounts, personal checking, the investment portfolio, and the credit lines. We are triggering the removal clause for the CEO position based on the morality breach. We are moving all liquid assets to Hart Legacy Trust too. He will wake up with nothing but the change in his pocket." I looked around the small, cramped room. I looked at the cast-off furniture and the view of the garage roof. He told me that starting tomorrow, I would not be allowed to touch a single account, I said. "I am just making sure he is right, because there won't be any accounts left to touch." "Understood," Marcus said. "I am ready on my end." My fingers hovered over the keyboard. On the screen, a prompt waited. "Execute asset reallocation YN." I thought of the little girl in the restaurant, holding a notebook that was supposed to be her future. I thought of the man who tore it from her hands. "Do it," I said, and I pressed the Y key. The screen on my battered laptop glowed with a harsh blue light, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the garage apartment. The lines of code scrolled faster than the eye could follow. A prompt flashed multi-factor authentication required. I typed in the code from the secure token Marcus had given me A moment later, my burner phone buzzed. It was the bank's fraud department. "This is the verification desk," a young man's voice said, sounding bored. "We have a flag on a massive transfer request from the Northwind Relay Family Trust Master account. I need to speak to Mr. Adrian Hart." "You are speaking to the grantor," I said, my voice steel. "Transfer me to Director Stevens. Now." There was a pause, then a series of clicks. A familiar, anxious voice came on the line. "Mrs. Hart Evelyn. Is that really you? We haven't seen activity on your personal authorization key in 3 years." "It is me, Arthur," I said. "And I am invoking the revocation clause. You have the legal paperwork on file from the trust's inception. Adrian is merely the beneficiary. I am the owner. Do you see the digital signature from Mr. Hale?" Yes, I see it," Arthur stammered. "But this will drain the operating accounts, the household staff, the mortgage, the—" "Do it," I commanded. The line went silent for a heartbeat before he spoke again. "Executing protocol." On my screen, the numbers began to appear. I stared at the rows of figures that represented my life's work, now squandered. There was Adrian's personal checking account, holding nearly $200,000, the household operations account, which Brooke used for her spa treatments, sat at $50,000. Then there was the so-called Heart Charity Initiative, a tax shelter Adrian used to launder expenses for his parties, holding over $3 million. I moved the cursor. Select all. My finger hovered over the enter key. A wave of nausea hit me. I was not just moving money, I was deleting my son's existence. I closed my eyes and saw his face in the restaurant, the spittle flying from his mouth as he screamed at me. I pressed the key, transferring to Hart Legacy Trust 2. Processing. "Marcus," I said into the phone, "the money is moving." "I am hitting send on the email to the board of directors right now," Marcus replied, his voice tight. "I have attached the full legal brief regarding the morality clause. And Evelyn, I included the video." "The video—" "Security footage from the Sterling Finch," Marcus said grimly. "I called in a favor. The board will see exactly how their CEO treats the founder of the company. It qualifies as gross reputational damage." On my screen, a series of red padlocks appeared next to Adrian's name. The internal system at Northwind Relay Logistics was reacting to Marcus's filing. User access revoked. Corporate credit suspended. Email server locked. Somewhere in the main house, Adrian's phone was likely lighting up with notifications he was too drunk to hear. I stood up and grabbed my old suitcase from the closet. I did not pack the cashmere sweaters Adrian had bought me for Christmas to assuage his guilt. I left the silk scarves. I took only 3 sets of plain clothes, my toiletries, and a small wooden box containing the letters my late husband wrote to me during the war. I took the framed photo of Lily from her 10th birthday. That was all. Before I zipped the bag, I pulled a cream-coloured envelope from my pocket. I walked to the window that overlooked the main house and imagined Adrian asleep in his king-sized bed, dreaming of a power he no longer possessed. I would have to sneak into the mudroom to leave it. But he needed to see it. Inside was a copy of the trust certificate, highlighting the words Grantor Evelyn Hart. On a sticky note, I had written a single line. "You called the wrong person. A thief." 10 minutes later, I slipped out the side door of the garage. The night air was biting. I walked past the row of cars gleaming under the security lights, the silver Porsche, the black SUV, the vintage convertible. I had paid for every bolt and leather seat in that driveway. Now, they were just hollow shells, property of a trust that had just reclaimed them. I walked to the main road and flagged down a taxi I had called from the burner phone. The driver was a tired-looking man who didn't ask why an elderly woman was leaving a multi-million-dollar estate at 3 a.m. with one suitcase. "Where to?" he asked. "The motel near the airport," I said. "The cheapest one." 40 minutes later, I sat on a lumpy mattress in a room that smelled of stale cigarettes and lemon cleaner. I opened the laptop one last time. The screen displayed a final status report. Asset reallocation complete. Beneficiary Adrian Hart suspended indefinitely. I shut the laptop and turned off the lamp. In the darkness, the only sound was the rattle of the old air conditioner unit and the thumping of my own heart. I lay back, staring at the ceiling. I wasn't the trembling old woman in the garage anymore. I was the CEO again. I had just fired my own son, and God help me. I was ready for the war that would start when the sun came up. I sat on the edge of the motel bed, the cheap polyester comforter scratching my legs. On the small laminate table before me, the secure tablet Marcus had couriered over glowed with a mosaic of live feeds. It was like watching a reality show where I was both the director and the only audience member. On the top left screen, the master bedroom at Ravensbrook Estates was bathed in the pale light of morning. I watched Adrian stir under the hand-stitched Italian wool blankets. He reached for the bell pull on his nightstand, a pretentious antique he used to summon Maria for his morning espresso. He yanked it. Nothing happened. He yanked it again, harder, his face twisting in confusion. Maria wasn't coming. She, along with the cook and the groundskeeper, had received an email from the trust at 6 a.m, informing them that their contracts were temporarily suspended pending an internal audit. Adrian threw off the covers and stomped down to the kitchen, expecting the smell of fresh croissants and brewing coffee. Instead, he found a dark, silent room. He pulled out his phone, likely to order a latte from his favorite cafe. I saw him tap the screen furiously. "What do you mean, declined?" he muttered to the empty room. "Try it again." He switched apps, pulling up his banking interface. The high-definition security camera in the kitchen captured the exact moment his jaw went slack. He wasn't looking at the 7-figure balance he expected. He was looking at a perfect, round zero. Every account checking, savings. Investment was grayed out with a red banner that read, "Access restricted by grantor." "Brooke," he screamed, his voice cracking. "Brooke, something is wrong with the internet." The camera in the living room showed Brooke setting up a tripod and a ring light. She was prepping for a live stream to launch her new swimwear line. Suddenly, the lights flickered and died. The hum of the smart fridge ceased. The automated blinds froze halfway up. I had flagged the utility bills for an ownership verification review, which effectively cut the power until the actual owner, me, called to restore it. "My light!" Brooke shrieked. "Adrian, the power is out." Adrian was already on the phone, pacing the kitchen floor in the dark. I tapped into the audio feed Marcus had routed from the bank's VIP line. "Mr. Stevens, I am being hacked," Adrian yelled into the phone. "Someone wiped the accounts. I need a freeze on everything. Mr. Hart." Director Stevens' voice was calm, almost bored. "There is no hack. The accounts are held by the Northwind Relay Family Trust. The grantor exercised her right to revoke beneficiary access this morning. We are just following the legal protocol." The grantor. Adrian paused, the blood draining from his face. My mother. She can't. She is senile. She doesn't know what she is doing. The paperwork was notarized and verified. Sir. Have a nice day. Click. Brooke ran into the kitchen, clutching her phone, her face pale without the flattering studio lighting. My credit cards aren't working. Adrian, I just got a notification that my sponsorship with the swimwear brand is on hold due to negative media exposure risk. What is going on? Get dressed, Adrian snapped, grabbing his car keys. We are going to the office. I will fire everyone. I will burn that place down if I have to. I switched the feed to the lobby of the Northwind Relay Logistics headquarters in downtown Chicago. It was 10 o'clock. Adrian stormed through the glass doors, looking disheveled in a wrinkled shirt he had to retrieve himself. He marched to the security turnstiles and slapped his platinum badge against the reader. Beep, beep, beep. A red light flashed. He tried again. Red light. Open the gate, he barked at the receptionist, a young woman named Sarah whom I had hired myself. I can't. Mr. Hart, Sarah stammered, looking at her screen with wide eyes. Your badge is listed as deactivated. The system says suspended employee. I am the CEO, Adrian roared, slamming his hand on the desk, up on the 42nd floor, inside the boardroom. The feed showed the board members sitting in silence, at the head of the table, where Adrian usually sat. A large screen was playing the video from the restaurant. They watched Adrian point his finger. They heard him call me a thief. They watched him humiliate the woman who had made them all rich. Old Tom, a board member who had driven trucks with me in the 80s, shook his head. Disgraceful, he murmured. Absolutely disgraceful. Back in the lobby, Adrian was trying to force the turnstile. Two large security guards, Mike and Sam, stepped forward. They were men whose children's tuitions I had helped pay for quietly over the years. They knew who signed the real checks. Sir, you need to step back, Mike said, his voice firm but polite. Don't touch me, Adrian screamed. I own this building. Not anymore, sir, Mike said. You are currently trespassing. Please leave before we have to escort you out. From my motel room, I took a sip of the bitter, watery coffee I had made in the tiny plastic maker. I watched my son, the man who thought he was a king, being physically blocked from the elevator by the very people he treated like furniture. He looked small. He looked confused. For the first time in his life, the world wasn't bending to his will. You wanted to be the boss. Adrian, I whispered to the screen. Welcome to the entry level. I tapped the screen and turned off the feed. The show was over for now. The real work was just beginning. The boardroom was silent as a tomb. From my motel room, I watched the live feed on my tablet, observing the final humiliation of the man who had once been my pride and joy. Adrian was not sitting at the head of the mahogany table. That chair was empty. He had been relegated to the far end, sitting on a folding chair because security had already removed his executive leather recliner. Marcus stood at the front, his voice crisp and unyielding as he read from a thick file. Mr. Hart. Due to gross ethical violations and fiscal irresponsibility, the board has voted unanimously. You are stripped of your title as CEO, effective immediately. You are also barred from authorizing any transactions. This is insane, Adrian shouted, standing up so abruptly his chair clattered to the floor. I built this company. I tripled the revenue in 3 years. You are listening to a bitter old woman who doesn't understand modern business. Sit down, Adrian, Marcus said, not even looking up from his papers. The revenue growth came from the logistics contracts Evelyn secured 5 years ago. What you tripled was the overhead, the private jets, the client dinners that were actually parties for your friends, the vacation homes listed as regional offices. It is all here. My mother is a leech. Adrian spat, his face flushing a deep, ugly red. She has been living off my success for years. The room went dead quiet. Marcus took off his glasses and looked Adrian in the eye. Your mother, Marcus said softly, is the sole owner of 51% of the voting stock. She is also the one who personally covered your salary 3 years ago when you forgot to attend the shareholder meeting because you were hungover in Vegas. She paid your way so the board wouldn't fire you then. You have never been the provider. Adrian, you have always been the dependent. I saw old Tom look away, hiding a cringe. Adrian slumped back into his chair, defeated by the truth he had spent a lifetime ignoring. Later that afternoon, the cameras at the Ravensbrook estate showed a grey, relentless rain falling. Adrian and Brooke pulled into the driveway in her car, as his company vehicle had already been towed from the office lot. But they were not alone. A white van was parked near the entrance, and 2 men in uniforms were attaching a clamp to the wheel of the vintage Jaguar. What is this? I heard Brooke shriek through the audio feed. Get away from our car. A man with a clipboard stepped forward. Mrs. Hart. We are with the Trust's Asset Management Division. We have orders to inventory the contents of the property. Since the residence is owned by the Trust, and you are currently suspended beneficiaries, you are technically guests. We need to ensure no assets are removed. They pushed past the men and stormed into the house. The interior was dark and cold. This is a nightmare, Brooke said, throwing her designer bag onto the couch. I cannot live like this. Adrian, I didn't marry you to clip coupons. I didn't sign up to share a bathroom in some rental apartment because your mother threw a tantrum. Shut up, Adrian roared. He ripped the watch off his wrist, a heavy gold timepiece he loved to flash. I don't need her money. I have my own investments. This watch alone is worth $50,000. A Japanese investor gave it to me. He hurled the watch against the wall. It shattered, springs and gears scattering across the floor. Brooke looked at the broken pieces, her face twisting into a sneer. You idiot, she said coldly. There was no Japanese investor. Your mother bought that for you. She bought everything. You don't own a single thing. Do you? I have a backup, Brooke muttered, her fingers flying across her phone screen. I have been putting away 10% of every sponsorship deal into a rainy day fund. We can go to New York. I have almost $80,000. Suddenly, her phone pinged with a notification. Then another. Then another. No, she whispered. No, no, no. What? Adrian asked, his head in his hands. My account, Brooke said, her voice trembling. It says, frozen due to investigation of misappropriated trust funds. They are saying the sponsorship money was funneled through the family marketing budget, which belongs to the trust. Adrian's phone buzzed. He picked it up and read the email notification aloud, his voice hollow. Secondary account access denied. Please contact legal counsel. Brooke stared at him. The realization hit her that even her escape hatch had been built on my foundation. She backed away, pulling her phone to her ear. I am going to call Jessica in Manhattan, she said, not looking at him. I need some space. Adrian. I can't deal with this right now. She walked out of the room, leaving him alone in the growing dark. Adrian sat there for a long time. He reached for a bottle of scotch on the sidebar, pouring a glass with shaking hands. As he drank, his eyes wandered to the coffee table. There, resting on a silver tray, was the envelope I had left. He tore it open. He pulled out the document, reading the highlighted text that confirmed he was nothing more than a temporary beneficiary. Then he read the handwritten note. "You called the wrong person a thief." He crumpled the paper in his fist and hurled the glass across the room. But the silence of the house swallowed the sound instantly. He was finally the king of his own castle, and it was completely empty. The glow of the television in my motel room flickered, casting long, dancing shadows against the peeling wallpaper. I sat on the edge of the bed, a cup of lukewarm tea in my hand, watching my son declare war. He wasn't fighting with legal briefs or financial audits anymore. He was fighting with the oldest, dirtiest weapon in the book character assassination. On the screen, a local news channel was airing an exclusive interview. Adrian sat in a dimly lit booth of a high-end bar, his face a mask of carefully constructed sorrow. Beside him sat a man I recognized from the tabloids, a fixer and PR specialist, known for burying scandals and inventing truths. "My mother," Adrian said to the camera, his voice breaking theatrically. "She hasn't been herself for a long time. The anger, the paranoia, the stealing. I tried to protect her. I tried to keep it private. But when she emptied the company accounts, I realized she was a danger to herself." The lawyer nodded gravely. "We are looking at a classic case of cognitive decline being exploited. Mrs. Hart is clearly confused. We believe she is being manipulated." Then came the montage. They had dug up footage from security cameras in the parking lot from months ago, a clip of me dropping my keys and looking around for them, edited and slowed down. It didn't look like a woman with slippery fingers. It looked like a woman who didn't know where she was. They played a soundless clip of me arguing with a valet who had scratched my car, but with the caption, "Evelyn Hart, Episodes of Unprovoked Rage." "They are building a narrative," Marcus said over the speakerphone. His voice was tight with worry. "They know they can't break the trust, so they are going to break you. If they can prove you are mentally incompetent, Adrian gets appointed as your guardian. He gets control of everything again." I watched as the scene cut to Brooke. She had wiped off her makeup to look pale and exhausted. She spoke into a microphone with a tremor in her voice that was almost impressive. "It has been so hard." Brooke sniffled. "Just last week, she was supposed to pick up our daughter, Lily, and she just forgot. She didn't show up. We were terrified." I gripped the teacup until my knuckles turned white. It was a lie. I had been stuck in traffic behind a jackknifed tractor trailer for 2 hours and had called the school immediately to send a chaperone. I had never, not once, forgotten my granddaughter. But the media didn't care about traffic reports. They cared about the tears of a pretty blonde woman. However, the interview took a turn I didn't expect. The reporter asked Brooke if they would bring Lily on camera to corroborate the story. "Absolutely," Brooke began, reaching for her purse as if to show a photo. "No," Adrian cut in sharply. His hand shot out, blocking the camera lens for a second. "Leave Lily out of this. She is a child. We are not using her as a prop." For a split second, I saw the ghost of the boy I had raised. He was selfish, yes, and cruel. But he drew a line at exploiting his daughter. It was a small mercy, but it didn't change the fact that he was currently paying a man to destroy my life. Marcus had dug up the details on Adrian's new team. They were a rogues gallery of unethical professionals. There was Dr. Trent Malley, a psychiatrist who had lost his license twice for signing prescription pads without seeing patients. Adrian had wired him $20,000 that morning. The implication was clear. Malley was going to diagnose me with severe dementia without ever shaking my hand. Then there was Derek Shaw, a private investigator who preferred cash payments and specialized in intimidation. I knew he was likely outside my old house right now, or tracking my credit cards, waiting to catch me buying liquor or looking disoriented. "This is dangerous." "Evelyn," Marcus said. "If Malley signs an affidavit stating you are an immediate threat, they can get an emergency court order. They could force you into a facility for observation before we even get a hearing. Once you are in the system, it is incredibly hard to get out." I set the teacup down. "He wants to lock me away," I said quietly. "He would rather put his mother in an institution than get a job." "We need to go on the offensive," Marcus urged. "Civil defense isn't enough. We need to show the court that this guardianship petition is part of a criminal conspiracy." I looked at the laptop sitting closed on the desk. Inside were decades of emails. There were records of Adrian forcing accountants to falsify quarterly reports. There were texts where he joked about using company funds to pay off gambling debts. I had saved them all, thinking I would never use them, thinking I could just lecture him and fix it myself. "Marcus," I said, my voice hardening, "start pulling the files from the hidden server. Specifically, look for the email chain where he authorized the purchase of the unapproved hazardous materials to save 4% on shipping costs, and find the coerced signatures from the junior staff." "You want to file criminal charges?" Marcus asked. "Evelyn, that will put him in prison. Not just broke, but behind bars." I looked at the screen, where Adrian was now dabbing his eyes with a handkerchief, playing the victim perfectly. "He just paid a doctor to take away my freedom." "Marcus," I said. "He declared war. I am just bringing the ammunition." "If Adrian wants to use a doctor to lock you away," Marcus said, his voice low over the phone line, "then let's give him a doctor. But let's make sure there is an audience." It was a cold, calculated gamble. We chose St. Jude's Medical Center, a private hospital where I had personally funded the new cardiac wing 5 years ago. I met with the hospital director, Dr. Larson, in his office. When I explained that my son was planning to use a corrupt psychiatrist to fabricate a mental health crisis and seize my assets, Larson didn't just listen. He was furious. "We will not have this facility used as a stage for a crime." "Evelyn," Larson said, "we will set up in the observation suite." The suite was designed for medical students to watch surgeries, equipped with a one-way mirror and high-fidelity audio recording. But today, the audience wasn't students. Behind the glass sat Marcus, 2 uniformed police officers, and a cynical district attorney named Vance, who was very interested in the sudden wave of elder fraud cases in the county. I played my part as the bait. I had a contact leak the appointment details to a known associate of Derek Shaw, the private investigator Adrian had hired. The message was simple: Evelyn Hart. General checkup. Room 304. 10 in the morning. I arrived 15 minutes early. I wore my sharpest charcoal suit, my hair pulled back in a neat chignon. I greeted the receptionist by name, asked about her children, and filled out my paperwork with a steady hand. Every interaction was being filmed to contradict the narrative of the confused, wandering old woman Adrian was selling to the press. At 10 o'clock exactly, the trap snapped shut. On the security monitor inside the observation room, I watched them arrive. Adrian looked pale and sweaty, twitching in his designer jacket. Brooke was clinging to his arm, looking around nervously as if she expected paparazzi. Dr. Trent Malley walked beside them, clutching a leather medical bag, while Derek Shaw trailed behind, checking his phone. They stopped in the corridor, right under a hidden microphone. "Are we sure this will work?" Brooke whispered, her voice trembling. "What if she screams?" "She won't scream if Malley does his job," Adrian hissed. "Doc, you said the sedative acts fast. Right, I just need her lucid enough to sign the power of attorney. Then she can sleep for a week." "Don't worry," Malley said, his voice oily and arrogant. "I will declare her an immediate danger to herself. Standard 5150 hold. By the time she wakes up, she will be in a secure facility in Wisconsin. But we need to settle the fee. I want the other 10,000 in cash before I write the report." "You will get it when she is in the van?" Adrian snapped, behind the glass. District Attorney Vance adjusted his tie. "Tell me we got that audio," he said to the technician. "Loud and clear." The tech confirmed. I sat on the exam table in room 304. The real doctor, a kind woman named Dr. Evans, was listening to my heart. "Your blood pressure is a little elevated, Evelyn," she noted gently. "I imagine it is," I replied. "I am about to be assaulted by my own son." Suddenly, the door burst open. Dr. Malley strode in, not bothering to knock. He was wearing a white coat he must have pulled from his bag to look the part. "Emergency psych consult," Malley announced, waving a clipboard. "I am Dr. Malley, covering for the department. We have received reports of an erratic patient." Dr. Evans stood her ground. "I didn't call for a consult. Who are you?" "I am taking over," Malley said, ignoring her. He turned to me, pulling a pre-filled syringe from his pocket. "Mrs. Hart, you are agitated. I need you to calm down. This will just a little pinch to help you relax." Adrian and Derek appeared in the doorway, blocking the exit. Adrian's eyes met mine. There was no love in them, only a desperate, hungry panic. "Just let him help you." "Mum," Adrian said, his voice shaking. "You are not well. You are confused. Just sign the papers and take the medicine." "I am not confused." "Adrian," I said, my voice steady and cold. "I know exactly what day it is. And I know exactly how much you promised to pay this man to drug me." Malley stepped forward, raising the needle. "Restrain her," he ordered Derek. "Now," Marcus yelled from behind the glass. The wall speaker crackled. "Police freeze, nobody move." The door connecting the observation room flew open. The two officers swarmed into the room, guns drawn. Malley dropped the syringe. It clattered loudly on the linoleum floor. Derek Shaw tried to run, but an officer slammed him against the wall before he could take 2 steps. Adrian stood frozen in the doorway, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. He looked from the police to me, then to the syringe on the floor. The colour drained from his face until he looked like a corpse. It is a misunderstanding," Adrian stammered, raising his hands. "She is my mother. I was just trying to help her." "We heard the audio, Mr. Hart," the district attorney said, stepping into the room. "Conspiracy to commit kidnapping, medical malpractice, assault, and attempted fraud. You weren't helping her. You were hunting her. I stood up from the exam table and smoothed my jacket. I walked past Dr. Malley, who was being cuffed on the floor, weeping about his medical license. I stopped in front of Adrian. I built a company, Adrian, I said quietly, looking into his terrified eyes. I built a fortune. Did you really think I wouldn't know how to build a trap? The small observation room felt like a pressure cooker. The air smelled of antiseptic and sweat. Adrian was pressed against the counter, his face a mask of frantic denial as the police officers held his arms. "There is a misunderstanding here," Adrian shouted, his voice cracking. "I am her son. I was trying to protect her. She is sick. Officer. She doesn't know what she is doing." District Attorney Vance didn't say a word. He simply tapped the screen of his tablet and hit play. Adrian's voice, clear and amplified, filled the room. "I just need her lucid enough to sign the power of attorney. Then she can sleep for a week." The silence that followed was heavy. Adrian stared at the tablet as if it were a bomb that had just detonated. That was taken out of context?" Adrian stammered, looking around for an ally. "I meant she needs rest. Save it for the judge, Mr. Hart," Vance said coldly. He turned his attention to Dr. Malley, who was cowering on the floor, his hands cuffed behind his back. "And you, Doctor. We checked your records. You have a gambling debt of $40,000 in Vegas. Funny how a wire transfer of exactly that amount was scheduled from Mr. Hart's personal account this morning." Malley crumbled. He was a man made of weak will and greed, and he broke instantly. "He promised to pay it off," Malley cried, snot running down his nose. "He told me she was crazy. He said if I just signed the 5150 form, nobody would question it, because he is the next of kin. I didn't want to hurt her. You were going to inject me with a sedative strong enough to drop a horse." "Doctor," I said from the chair, my voice calm. "Do not pretend you care about my health." Adrian spun around, his eyes wild. "He is lying. Him and that private investigator. They misled me. I just hired them to check on you." Vance sighed and pulled a piece of paper from his folder. "We have the emails. Adrian? Specifically the one you sent to Mr. Shaw 2 days ago." He adjusted his glasses and read aloud. "Do whatever it takes to make sure she cannot touch the company again. Money is not a problem. Just get her declared incompetent before the board meeting." In the corner, I saw movement. Brooke was inching toward the door, her heels clicking softly against the tile. She looked like a trapped animal, her eyes darting between her husband and the exit. "Going somewhere, Mrs. Hart?" a female officer asked, stepping into her path. "I didn't do anything," Brooke shrieked, her composure shattering. "I just wanted to make sure Lily was safe. I didn't know about the needle." "I want a lawyer." "You will need one," Vance said. "Conspiracy isn't a spectator sport." I stood up slowly. My legs felt heavy, not from age, but from the sheer weight of the betrayal. I walked over to where Adrian stood. He stopped struggling against the cops and looked at me. For a second, I saw the little boy who used to scrape his knees and run to me for a bandage. That boy was dead. "I let you pretend you were the boss because I wanted you to feel important," I said softly. "I paid the settlements when you screamed at the warehouse staff. I covered the losses when you insisted on that foolish expansion into luxury transport. I gave you every chance to be a man. You never gave me anything. Adrian spat, his fear turning into venom. You held the purse strings. You controlled everything. You are just a sad, old control freak who can't stand that I am the future. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the small USB drive I had retrieved from the safe the night before. I placed it gently on the metal counter next to the syringe. The future? I asked. This drive contains the forensic accounting of the last 3 years. It proves you have been pulling money out of the employee pension fund to cover your crypto losses. That is federal fraud. Adrian. I didn't want to use it. I thought, maybe he is just incompetent. But you aren't just bad at business. You are bad at being a human being. Last night, you called me a thief, I continued, my voice hardening into steel. But today, you stood in this room and tried to steal my mind. You tried to steal my freedom because you were too lazy to earn your own money. Mrs. Hart is perfectly sane. Dr. Larson interjected, stepping forward with my chart. She scored 30 out of 30 on the cognitive assessment. She can recite the current date, the president's name, and she even recalled a specific contract number from decades ago. Contract NRL 94 Alpha, I recited, looking Adrian in the eye. The first major deal I signed with the automotive union, 30 years ago. I remember every clause. Do you even know the names of the people you fired yesterday? Adrian said nothing. He just slumped, the fight draining out of him as the reality of the handcuffs settled in. As the officers began to lead them out, Derek Shaw, the private investigator, paused as he passed me. He looked tired and unimpressed by the drama. Nothing personal, lady, he muttered. I just take the check. I used to believe that hard work was enough, I replied, meeting his gaze. My son taught me that some people will work harder to steal $1 than to earn 100. Crime isn't a job, Mr. Shaw. It is just a shortcut to a cell. The door closed behind them, leaving me alone in the silent room with Dr. Larson and the prosecutor. I looked at the empty doorway. I felt a strange, hollow sensation in my chest. The cord had been cut. It wasn't just money anymore. The legal battle that was coming wouldn't be a family dispute. It would be a war between a founder and a criminal. And as I picked up my purse, I knew I was ready to fire the first shot in court. The hearing was closed to the public, but the heavy oak doors of the family court could barely muffle the roar of the press gathered outside. Inside, the air was still and smelled of floor wax and stale ambition. Adrian sat at the plaintiff's table, looking scrubbed and polished, wearing a suit I had bought him for his 30th birthday. He refused to look at me. His lawyer, a sharp-faced man named Mr. Sterling, paced the floor, weaving a narrative that was almost impressive in its audacity. Your Honor, Sterling said, gesturing theatrically toward me, we are looking at a clear case of financial abuse. Mrs. Hart is an elderly woman who cannot accept that her era is over. She is jealous of her son's vitality, his modern approach to business. She has cut off his lifeline money he earned, money he relied on to teach him a petty lesson. Adrian Hart is a victim of a vindictive parent who is weaponizing her wealth. I sat silently next to Marcus. I felt a dull ache in my chest, not from his words, but from the realization that Adrian was nodding along, believing his own lie. When it was Marcus's turn, he did not pace. He simply stood up and placed a large diagram on the easel. It was the structure of the Northwind Relay Family Trust. Let us be clear on the law, Marcus said, his voice level. The grantor is the owner. The beneficiary is a guest, and guests can be evicted if they break the house rules. The primary rule of this trust is that the beneficiary must not cause harm to the reputation or safety of the grantor. Marcus dimmed the lights. On the wall, the projector played the footage from the Sterling Finch. It was raw and uncut. The courtroom watched in uncomfortable silence as Adrian's face twisted in rage, his finger pointing at me, his voice screaming that I was a thief. And from yesterday, Marcus added, playing the audio file from the hospital. Just let the drugs kick in. Get her to sign. Money is not a problem. The judge, a stern woman with grey hair named Judge Patterson, leaned forward. She stared at Adrian. Is that your voice, Mr. Hart? Adrian tugged at his collar. It was a joke, Your Honor. Dark humour. We were just venting. Nobody is laughing. Mr. Hart, Judge Patterson said coldly. Marcus then presented the financials. He showed the transfers of millions of dollars into shell companies owned by Adrian's fraternity brothers, the crypto wallets that had evaporated into nothing, the real estate projects that never broke ground. He didn't just spend the money, Marcus said. He stole it from the company to hide his incompetence. That is irrelevant, Sterling objected. He is still the sole heir. He is the only son of the Hart family line. The trust was built for the family. I stood up then. May I speak? Your Honor. The judge nodded. I reached into my bag and pulled out a yellowed envelope, sealed with red wax that had cracked with age. My hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of the secret I had carried for 35 years. My husband, William, was a proud man, I said, my voice echoing in the quiet room. But he was also a suspicious one. When Adrian was 5 years old, William ran a test. He never told Adrian. He barely told me. I handed the envelope to the bailiff, who passed it to the judge. She opened it, reading the faded document inside. Her eyebrows shot up. What is this? Adrian asked, his voice rising in panic. It is a DNA test. Adrian? I said, looking at him. William Hart was not your biological father. The room seemed to suck in a breath. Adrian stood up, his face draining of colour. You are lying. I am a Hart. I am the heir. I knew, I continued, fighting the tears that threatened to fall. I knew, and I chose to raise you anyway. I gave you his name. I gave you my love. I gave you every opportunity to be a good man. I thought that nurture was stronger than nature. I thought that if I treated you like a son, you would treat me like a mother. I took a breath. But the trust is specific. Adrian? Marcus, please read the beneficiary clause. Marcus picked up the contract. The beneficiary must be a direct blood descendant of Evelyn and William Hart, or a person significantly designated by the grantor in writing. I designated you, I said to Adrian, who was now gripping the table for support. I chose you, but you used the Hart name to humiliate me. You used it to try and lock me away. So, as of this morning, I have revoked that designation. I looked at the judge. He is not a blood relation, Your Honor, and he is no longer my designee, legally, to this trust. He is a stranger. Adrian slumped back into his chair, his mouth open, no sound coming out. The identity he had wrapped himself in the rich air. The logistics prints had just been stripped away, leaving him naked and shivering. Judge Patterson didn't need a recess. She banged her gavel with a sound like a gunshot. "The plaintiff's request to dissolve the trust control is denied," she ruled. "Mrs. Hart retains full ownership. Furthermore, given the evidence of attempted medical kidnapping and the forensic accounting presented, I am referring this matter to the criminal court. Mr. Hart, you are to surrender your passport immediately." Adrian didn't move. He just stared at the table, realizing that the woman he called a thief had just proven that he was the one who had been trespassing in a life that never really belonged to him. 3 weeks later, the silence in my motel room was absolute. Most of my belongings were gone, donated to a local shelter or packed into the single, battered suitcase standing by the door. On the desk, my laptop hummed, displaying a banking interface that looked like a relic from the late 90s. Adrian was currently sitting in a holding cell at the county detention center, denied bail due to flight risk. Yet, through Marcus, I knew he was clinging to one final lifeline. He believed he had a secret nest egg, a savings account at a small credit union he had opened years ago. He thought it was the one thing I couldn't touch, because he had deposited the cash himself. He was wrong. He had forgotten that when he opened that account, he was 17. He had needed a co-signer. That co-signer was me. And technically, the primary name on the ledger was still Evelyn Hart. I looked at the balance. $240,000. It was not a fortune compared to the empire I had built, but it was enough. It was enough for a lawyer, enough for a small apartment, enough for a second chance. For a moment, my finger hovered over the mouse. I remembered the little boy who used to save his allowance to buy me birthday cards. I felt a pang of the old maternal instinct, the urge to leave him this one last safety net. Then I remembered the needle in the hospital room. I remembered the look in his eyes when he told the doctor to knock me out. "Goodbye, Adrian," I whispered. I typed in the routing number for the Hart Legacy Trust 2. With a single click, I drained the account. I designated the funds specifically for 2 purposes: a college scholarship fund for Lily and her future children, and an emergency relief fund for the warehouse employees of Northwind Relay Logistics, the very people Adrian had treated like dirt for years. The screen refreshed. Balance $0.00. I printed the transaction receipt on the back of the paper. I wrote a single sentence in my sharp, angular handwriting. "You were right. Today, that account was truly stolen." I slipped it into an envelope addressed to the detention center. It was the last piece of mail I would ever send him. Before leaving the room, I met Marcus one last time in the parking lot. He looked older, tired, but satisfied. I signed the final stack of documents on the hood of his car. "This appoints a professional management firm to run the company," Marcus said, stamping the papers. "Lily is now the primary beneficiary, with full access granting when she turns 25. And the community center in your old neighborhood gets the annual endowment." "And Brooke?" I asked. "She is cooperating with the district attorney to reduce her sentence," Marcus replied. "She sent you an email, by the way." I checked my phone. It was a long, rambling message from Brooke, filled with excuses. I never imagined it would go this far. "Evelyn, I was just scared. I am so sorry." I didn't feel anger, just a profound fatigue. I typed a reply: "Focus on being a mother to Lily. If the court allows it. As for the rest, it is too late." My final stop was the park near Lily's private school. It was a grey, windy afternoon. Lily sat on the bench beside me, licking a vanilla cone. I didn't tell her that her father was in jail or that her mother was facing fraud charges. I didn't poison her well. Grandma is going to go away for a while, I told her, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. I need to see the ocean. I need to rest. Will you come back for my birthday? She asked. I will always be watching out for you. Lily, I said, dodging the promise. And remember, you have the notebook. You have the key. You are going to be strong. Stronger than all of us. An hour later, I stood on the platform of Union Station. The train to the Pacific Northwest hissed and steamed, ready to depart. I wasn't Evelyn Hart, the CEO, anymore. I was just an old woman in a wool coat with a ticket to a small coastal town where nobody cared about logistics or trusts. I pulled my phone from my pocket, the burner, the link to Marcus, the last tether to Chicago. I walked over to the trash can and dropped it in. It landed with a dull thud. The conductor shouted, "All aboard!" I stepped onto the train and found a window seat. As the engine lurched forward, the skyline of Chicago began to drift past. I saw the skyscrapers I had helped fill with cargo. I saw the city that had chewed me up and spat me out. And somewhere back there, in a cold cell, my son was about to receive a letter that would tell him he was truly, finally, alone. I didn't hope he would change. I didn't wait for a reunion. I watched the city disappear into the distance and smiled, a genuine, quiet smile. I realized then that I hadn't just emptied his bank account. I had withdrawn myself from his life completely. And that was the greatest luxury of all. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It was a painful journey to recount, but I believe the truth had to be told. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. Today, are you listening from a busy city like Chicago, or somewhere quiet near the ocean? Please let me know in the comments below. I read every single one of them to feel less lonely on my new journey. If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to the Grandma's Family Diary channel. Hit that like button and smash the hype button so this story can be heard by even more people. Your support means the world to me.